So from the go on.
No,
please, no. Fine, so the hand come up on. Answer there, otherwise you're going to have to come up here and answer.
Okay. It might be the wrong. You said last week that as soon as revelation came to the Prophet, he'd get one of the companions,
scribes,
one of the scribes, and he'd narrate it to them, and they wrote it down.
Right.
So commit to memory, and there was a written copy of it.
Yeah.
That's not actually the answer.
It is. It's most of the answer. First of all, in the lifetime of the Prophet, the whole Quran was recorded. Not a single part of it wasn't recorded. That's the first point. The second point is that we say the Quran we have. What's the asl? What's the primary? Not the book. It's the memory. The Quran is Quran في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم بل هو آيات بينات في صدور الذين أوتوا العلم. So you can get rid of the Quran, the Hafiz is still there. He'll read back into the Quran. You can write whatever you want in the Quran, the Hafiz will pick it up for you. The preservation of the Quran is not in the book. It's in the memorization, which is why Hifz al-Quran is so important. That's why it's a fard kifayah upon the Sunnah, that there always has to be people who memorize the Quran, because that's how, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ, and we are preserving this Quran through the rijal, through people who will memorize the Quran. The book was, in a sense, as a backup. So you say, okay, when Sayyidina Zayd ibn Thabit copied or transcribed it in the book form, they say alteration. So there was never a gap. There was never a gap where it could have been altered. It was from the very first revelation of Surah Iqra down to the very end. Every single ayah was recorded by the Messenger in his presence. And that was a requirement in his presence, such that when you actually study Tajweed and also you study Quranic sciences, when you study Tajweed, you also have a section, and many people don't study this part, but this is part of Quran, Rasm al-Quran, memorizing the writing of the Quran, because there are parts of the Quran in writing that differ to Arabic language, and according to many, it's haram for you to write the Quran in those cases according to Arabic language. Like the most obvious example, Ar-Rahman. How do you write Ar-Rahman in Arabic language? Alif, Lam, Ra, Ha, Mim, Alif, Noon. Not in the Quran. You're not allowed to do that in the Quran. You have to eliminate the Alif. Many cases in the Quran where letters were eliminated. Why? Because the Prophet told them to write it that way. That was through revelation. And that's why they say the half of the Quran in reality is not somebody who's done hifz there. He's also memorized the writing of it. He's also memorized the writing. A real half of the Quran is the one who's memorized both. Because that now strengthens and corroborates the memorization in your mind. So in Sayyidina Zayd ibn Thabit, he gathered together. And what happens in the time of Abu Bakr, when Abu Bakr and Umar come to them, what do they stipulate now? Eventually Sayyidina Zayd ibn Thabit agrees to the task, to the project of compiling the Quran. It takes approximately a year, which spans most of the Khilafah of Abu Bakr. He was Khalifa for about a year and a half. Most of that time, the project of compiling the Quran was taking place in there. What Zayd ibn Thabit and Umar, both of them doing together, they're in the masjid, sit there waiting for anybody to come who's got a copy of the Quran and has two witnesses, according to the majority, who were present there, to say that it was written in the presence of the Prophet. All of that to have absolute certainty that every single part of the Quran, and that's why there's a narration that seems to cause problems for some people. And this is something Orientalists pick up on. They say that the whole Quran was preserved except for the last two verses of Surah Tawbah. لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. The last two verses, they said they waited and they found nobody who had that. Meaning what? And some modern Muslims, there's a group called the Submitters, they said those two ayahs are not part of the Quran. So because of that, you're not Muslims. Because of that, you rejected Islam. They say those two last two verses are not part of the Quran. Rejecting of one word of the Quran, one letter, one vowel of the Quran is kufr. You cannot reject it. And here's two whole ayahs that they're rejecting. Why? Because they couldn't find anybody who had it. Why couldn't? What's that point? Not that they didn't have half of the Quran. No, they were waiting for somebody who came with a written version of it. And eventually, because it was scattered out among Sahaba, eventually somebody came with two witnesses to show that was written in the time of the Prophet, in the presence of the Prophet. So we say when that happened, That wasn't that they hadn't memorized it. Zayd ibn Thabit, I mean, it's an observation here. Why didn't Abu Bakr just ask Zayd ibn Thabit, write it from your memory? He's Hafiz al-Quran. He's a scribe of the messenger. That's not what he's asking for. He said, I want people to come with the original copies that were recorded in the presence of the Prophet, with two witnesses to confirm that that took place. So this claim of Orientalists, and in essence, that's just like guesswork. They're just making claims without backing up, and they're contradicting the historical reality of what was actually taking place at that time. And then, in the time of Sayyidina Uthman, a different thing happened, which is another discussion. But that requires study ulum al-Quran, study the background to the science of the Quran. It's very important, because a lot of these issues are clarified when you study the background to the Quran.
What about the 10 different ways of recitation? What was the history of that?
What about your maqamat? Do you really want to open that door?
It's going to be too long, then no.
It will be too long. Qira'at, you have two different things. You have ahruf in your qira'at. You have 10 recitals of the Quran, seven recitals of the Quran. And 7 recitals of the Quran, and then you have the qira'at of the Quran, which are two different things. The Quran came down in 7 different variants of the Prophet. Now, one thing to point out here, because that causes problems for people. And some people, like when they heard that, I thought there was only one Quran, and now they're talking about 7. It's tawatur. And say more than 20 Sahaba narrated this, and that the Quran was revealed. لَقَدْ أُنزِلَ الْقُرْآنُ عَلَى سَبْعَةِ أَحْرُفٍ. The Quran was revealed 7 variants. You have now a big debate amongst the ulama of Quran. What are these variants? What are these variants? Like an example of this, you read القارعة ما القارعة وما أدراك ما القارعة يوم يكون الناس كالعهن المنفوش يوم يكون الناس كالصوف المنفوش. That comes in the variants of the Quran. You got a lot of examples of that. You got a lot of examples in the Quran. كالصوف المنفوش كالعهن المنفوش. So what are the 7 variants? Just to give just a brief outline of the 7 variants, which is different notes here to the qira'at. Like when we talk about, you read of the recitation Hafs and Warsh and Qalun, it's different to the 7 ahruf, 7 variants. The 7 variants.
When you say the variants, you mean they're actually written differently as well?
That's another discussion now. We don't talk about that now. That's a discussion now. That's another point as well. Just the idea of 7 variants of the Quran. First of all, the Quran was revealed ala lughati Quraysh, the language of Quraysh, which was considered afsah al-Arab, considered the most eloquent of the languages of the Arabs. And you have different dialects of the Arabs, different tribes, and all of them were considered fasih, all of them were considered eloquent, but the most eloquent of all of them was Quraysh, and the most eloquent of Quraysh was who? Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the most eloquent of all of them. So it came in the language of Quraysh, Quran. For 21 years, Quran came down in one version, one variant, no difference. 21 years. What happens after 21 years? What's significant? That's what in the 8th year after Hijrah. What happens there? What's the significant events that happen, the significant conquests that happen there? No, not Persia.
Fatah Makkah.
Mecca. The conquest of Mecca. Then what happens after the conquest of Mecca? Now you get tribes after tribes of Arabs coming and accepting Islam. And then you get like multitude of tribes, what are known as al-mu'allafat qulubuhum. Many of them, they accepted Islam just because of expediency. Like they suddenly realized that Muhammad has conquered the whole of Arabia. It serves us better that we just accept Islam. And that's interesting. You see that after the Prophet passed away, many of these tribes renegade, they leave Islam. Because they only did it just because the sheer force of power they accepted Islam. They realized that he's now strong. It makes more sense for us to accept. But what now happens? Tribes from outside of Hijaz. Hijaz is on the western coast of Arabia. That's where you have now Mecca and Medina. They're in Hijaz. Remember, you didn't have Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a modern invention. Originally you had Hijaz. That's the place of the Prophet. Mecca, Medina. People around Mecca and Medina understood Lughat al-Quraysh. They understood the language of Quraysh without any difficulty. But now you get tribes come from all over Arabia. from the Yemen, they're coming from the east coast, they're coming from Najd, they're coming from the north of Arabia, they're all coming accepting Islam.